What does it mean to have no address? No address equals unemployment, no housing, no education, no place to call home, criminalization of innocent people, not a part of society. Though having an address equals solutions. This is the No Address Podcast. Welcome to our podcast where we break down the philosophy of having no address and what that really means. I am your host, Kalita Harris, and this podcast is an extension to the documentary series which depicts the criminalization of homelessness, the causes of homelessness, and practical solutions. Welcome to part 2 of No Address Podcast with Heather Hutton. If you missed part 1, I highly recommend starting there to hear the beginning of her experience through homelessness. So Heather, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So last week we ended where you were saying when you were homeless, you were debt-free. Then when you obtained a job, you started to accumulate debt. How did you remain out of debt by being homeless for over a year?
Well, there's an easy answer to that, Kalita. I closed my bank account. So my bank account couldn't go into the negative. I literally stood in a line at Bank of America for about 45 minutes to an hour to tell Bank of America I was there to close my account. And I had $900 to my name at the time. I withdrew the $900 and closed my account. So without an account, you can't go into debt.
Well, that makes sense. So then the $900, that's all you had to your name?
That's all I had to my name.
So what did you do with it?
Initially, I hid it in my laundry basket at my house because this is right before I evicted myself. And ironically, that ended up being a really good decision because a friend of mine had taken me on a canoe ride one day to try to help me kind of forget about my problems for the day and just live in the moment. It's a day I'll never forget because the canoe flipped and I got trapped underneath the canoe and had a near-death experience.
So the canoe flip, I know that was terrifying.
Well, initially my body started to sink and the water was really cold, so I started to get hypothermia. My friend bounced out of the canoe, so she made it to shore okay, and while I was trapped underneath the canoe, I could hear her voice, but I stopped having feeling in my body, and so I didn't know how I was going to get out of it. I kept trying to swim up towards the surface, but my head kept banging against the canoe to just try to get my last breath of air and go back down. Eventually, I had to swim against the current upstream to be able to get out of this scenario, and then the current pulled me back towards the boat, and I wrapped my body over the outside of the boat, and I couldn't breathe. I mean, I was drowning, and luckily another canoer came by in this moment and helped my friend help me get the canoe and myself to safety. And then when we got home that night to my house, where I was so happy to find safety, I realized that my house had been robbed. And so all the possessions that I had were gone. The first thing I did when I went into the house was to look for my last $900. And I guess the robber didn't think to check the bottom of my laundry basket. But they took everything else, from piggy banks to my computer to my bed to my mattress. Everything was gone. My roommate's things that were still there were completely gone.
Well, that sounds like an organized crime because someone's going to take your mattress, they have to be prepared to take your mattress.
Mm-hmm. When I spoke to the police and explained the situation, the police predicted that someone was scoping my house out.
Wow. So this was right before you were moving out.
Yeah.
Because you had to enter homelessness.
Correct.
On some level.
Correct.
So during this journey, throughout this year, what challenges did you face?
After I exhausted certain resources. I looked into welfare, I looked into food stamps, I looked into medical care, all the things that states provide for people. And ironically, I didn't qualify for anything. Now, this was in the state of Tennessee, so state by state, the laws are different. But I thought at a minimum, I would either be able to qualify for food stamps or some sort of medical assistance, given my circumstances, and I didn't qualify for anything.
Okay, hold it. So what do you have to not have in order to qualify for this? Because you don't have a bank account, you don't have a job, you don't have an address, but you don't qualify for anything.
I could have qualified for welfare if I was a single mom, if I had kids.
Granted.
Right.
But food stamps?
Yeah, I didn't qualify. I had to have a job to get food stamps.
Oh, I was about to ask, well, what thing did you have to have in order to, that does not make any sense. So if you are, oh my gosh, that kind of just gives you no hope in a sense of, if I don't have an address, if I don't have a bank account, if I don't have a job, I can't qualify for anything to fulfill my needs. I have to have one of those three in order to get something. That makes no sense.
And I really thought that I could at least find a counselor, like some free service to just sit down and talk to someone so they could help me navigate this, because it's the which came first, the chicken or the egg. Do I need an address first? Do I need a job first? Like, how do I resolve this situation? And I didn't even qualify for any sort of counseling or medical assistance or anything. And I would have, loved to have seen someone who would just listen to my circumstances and help me navigate.
No. This is America. You have to pay someone to listen to you. So what about shelters?
I looked into shelters. There was only one women's shelter that I knew about in Knoxville at the time, connected to the YMCA. They had a 6-month waiting list to get in there. So I did put myself on the list, but by the time they finally called me, I found other alternative places to stay, in warehouses or metal shops or couch surf or, back of my truck, wherever I could sleep.
Do you believe the point in time count numbers that the federal government is putting out is accurate on homelessness?
No.
Why?
Because there's too many people living off the radar. Like, how would they find these people to do a head count? I mean, I was constantly on the move the year and a half that I was without an address. So tracking me down wouldn't have been easy.
And you weren't on the streets.
And I wasn't on the streets, so I was trying to stay out of sight.
And the count basically comes from who's on the streets and who's in shelters. They exclude couch surfers, people that are on the move, people that are sleeping in their cars, RVs, and it's conducted one day of the year, January 21st. So, and they also exclude people that are sleeping. So those numbers can be triple at this point, because it seems like every year they're saying homelessness has gone down, but everywhere we go, we're seeing it more on the streets. So therefore, it's not, people are just living on the streets more. It's more of there's nowhere else for people to live because shelters are full. I'm not going to get into that right now because that'll be a whole nother episode. So let's continue your journey, because you created something amazing that I want you to tell the audience about.
When I finally did land on my feet, I decided that I needed to talk about it in some way. I came up with this idea that, well, maybe I can build a peaceful protest about the economy by building an American flag out of empty wallets.
That is fantastic.
I literally walked around South Georgia, Macon, Georgia in particular, with a cardboard sign around my neck that said, "We'll work for empty wallets," and started collecting wallets from all over the state of Georgia. And eventually the project went viral, so it went all over the country. And people could mail wallets to me to build an American flag. And even people I know who have wealth, many of them have an empty wallet story at some point in their life. So over time, after about 6 months of doing this, word got out to the Georgia Department of Labor that I was collecting empty wallets, and they called me on the phone and said, "We heard you're a local Georgia artist building a project that is exactly for the people we serve." And I said, yes, ma'am, that's what I'm doing. And they said, "Well, we would like to be a part of it." And I said, "Oh, that's awesome." It was fantastic. And that's when the project really took off. So when the Department of Labor stepped in, they had a collection box at every unemployment office in the state of Georgia where people could donate an empty wallet to build this flag project. That also was my ticket out of the teaching job to land into graduate school because it was my portfolio piece. And then the flag moved from South Georgia back to Knoxville, exactly the zip code where I was homeless. It was displayed for several years. And so now I'm looking for a new place to bring this project back to life, whether it's back to Georgia or to DC or wherever, where it can be shown. I got over 3,000 empty wallets for the project, and every wallet has a story.
Well, if you're listening out there and you do have a space for Heather's sculpture, how big is it?
It is 21 feet long and 12 feet tall. It's a hanging piece. It weighs over 700 pounds.
Wow.
There's a lot of rigging involved, but I built it in sections. And myself and a crew of about 3 to 5 people can assemble it on site and hang it or install it on a wall. It's called Will Work for Empty Wallet.
Will Work for Empty Wallet sculpture. And you use your creativity to deal with it on a mental level.
Just like the journey that you're going through, Kalita, building this documentary, I had a similar journey building that flag. And so that's where I really relate to this project and what it is you're trying to build and the voice you're trying to give people who don't have a voice is the exact same motivation I had for building that flag. And so I had unmeasurable amount of respect for what you're doing on No Address. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. And that was just my thing. I just was like, what can I do? This is so wrong on so many levels. Like, what can I do? I can't believe that this is a solution. Criminalize people with no address. I can't fathom me being in that situation and being alone and being in fear of if I'm seen, I may go to jail. What kind of life is that? You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to survive, but now I can't be seen. And I have to be seen in order to survive, to get out there, to get a job, or to communicate with people or anything in life. So I was like, I have a production company. I have all the tools that I need to document what's going on around me. And that's how the journey began. Another question, what have you experienced, and where is Heather Hutton now?
From personal experience, I've never financially fully recovered. I'm still, trying to make it, if you will. I know what the issue is not. The issue is not lack of work ethic. The issue is not lack of talent. The issue is not lack of education. It's not lack of any of these things. I'm perfectly employable. And if you look at my employment track record, I have a phenomenal track record as an employee. But I think what's different now is I'm not afraid of it. I used to be afraid of it. And now I'm sort of conditioned by it. Like, this is the norm, And I hope financially things get better for me, but I've figured out a way to make being not so financially successful okay. You know, to be comfortable with, it's not, you know, I don't have health care right now. I don't own a house. I don't have a car payment, blah, blah, blah. But I'm doing what I love, and I'm getting to contribute to all these great projects, and I'm trying to do what when I sit in a nursing home one day, look back and go, I wouldn't trade that for the world. You know what I'm saying? So I do hope to make it financially as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, as an artist, as a welder, as a sculptor, blah, blah, blah. But if the end result is I just get to contribute to projects like this, and those projects make noise, I'm happy.
What do you see as some immediate solutions?
The most immediate solution has to happen, I hate to say it out loud, but on the government side. And I want to preface the solution by saying, no, the government shouldn't be the gatekeeper, if you will, of solving this problem as a whole, but they can set a precedence that sends the rest of society down the right avenue to deal with this. And if they don't do it, and then the next line of action would be corporations, and then if they don't do it, the next line of actions needs to be people like us, which are already happening. You know, the people in your neighborhood who feel compassion towards the homelessness. Like, all these groups of people need to come together and to solve this problem.
And we got to get it out of that not in my backyard mentality, because a lot of people say, oh yeah, I'm compassionate, I want to solve it, and then they say, well, I'm going to build a shelter in Cobb County. Oh no, not in my backyard. Oh no, I don't want that. But then you say there needs to be more shelters, but then you don't want them in your community. You can't put 50 billion shelters downtown when there's not the infrastructure for it. So you have to go in the outskirts of some places, hopefully on a bus line, and where people have access to get around town. But when you say not in my backyard, then you are part of the problem of keeping homelessness where it is.
Well, the hypocrisy is real.
It's real.
And it's historic, and it's on record that particularly in the South, many white communities are afraid for people of color to move into their neighborhoods because it will devalue their property.
And statistically, the homeless population is black and brown people. So you already have a stigma on that. And, you know, that goes back centuries, you know, of coming into my neighborhood, not wanting people of color in my neighborhood because that brings down the value. Or if you move into my neighborhood, I'm moving out of the neighborhood. It doesn't matter if they had the income, the wealth to move in that neighborhood. It was because of the color of their skin. So now we still can't break down that barrier. So you have the homeless situation and you are of color. So therefore, those are two strikes against you that will not get you in my neighborhood.
But as long as the upper class and the lower class do not intermingle or do not talk or do not cross paths or share coffee, this problem is going to persist.
And on that note, we're going to end this podcast right now because that's a lot to ponder on. I need you all to just think, rewind, play back, download, you know, for future reference, because this is real. And there are not a lot of people talking about this or even just trying to figure out how we can work together to end homelessness. Like when I interviewed someone from the National Coalition, she was like, we want to be without a job. We don't want to have to be employed to end homelessness. We want this to end so we don't have a job. And who says that, right? But it's like they've been fighting for so long, since the 70s, and it's just ridiculous that we're still having this conversation. So now is the time. Now is really the time when so much technology and takeover is about to compromise the human autonomy of life right now. We have to figure out what we're going to do. Like Heather said, she did not have a plan. Now is the time to start having a plan, a what if plan. You know, you can have your bucket list all day before you die, but what you going to do while you living? You know what I mean? So have your plan of, how is my family going to be taken care of? What else do I need to do to make this work? How can I downgrade some things to not even be a part of all of this and have so much debt? So if anything happens, I know what I can do. I know I can build a tiny home. I can, live in a home, pay $10,000 and be debt free. I can take my home on wheels and go wherever I want. There's so many things that we don't need to be in this box of what society taught us forever, and then what our parents and generations and generations and generations has taught us forever. That's how you keep people controlled and programmed, is by preaching that same doctrine over and over, when we know that there are so many gateways and outlets to life. Just be creative. Just live and be happy. And that's what we want all of us to do. And there's so many people out there are happy, but we don't need you to bring them down. We don't need you to turn your cheek or make anybody feel less than. Education, knowledge is power. Knowledge is key. And that's what we want to do here on this podcast, No Address. And we want to turn everybody into having an address if they want it. Here's my tip of the week on how we can do more for our brothers and sisters without homes. So when Heather mentioned that she wanted to talk to someone, and she did not qualify to talk to someone, I would say, you can talk to us. You all can talk to us. We are the counselors. It is free, no charge, no stipulations, no hidden agenda. We are the counselors, and we should be doing that more for our brothers and sisters, because a lot of times they just want to vent and just talk. And if we were in that situation, we would just want to release and just let that go, because you've been holding it in for so long. You want some type of human connection to be able to express yourself and just have someone listen to you. Just act accordingly, humans. That's my tip of the week. We'll see you next week. Follow our documentary on our website at noaddressdocumentary.com. Peace and love.